I said to the team before we did the show on Thursday, really, you can see the split screen here of these three former presidents in New York celebrating themselves, raising money, and Trump going to the wake of this fallen police officer who was shot by this repeat offender who was out with no bail and should have been behind bars. And it got even worse as the day went on because we saw a huge hole in Biden's schedule and said, he could go. He could get out to Long Island in the day and still go to his fundraiser at night. And we didn't know what he was doing. And then it became clear he was doing the podcast with these three celebrity comedians, Will Arnett, Sean Hayes, and Jason Bateman. And they sat down with these guys. This is what Joe Biden did instead of going to the wake. And President Trump went to the wake. And I realize everything that the politicians do these days is political. Trump surely did not go there purely out of the goodness of his heart. He's not a dumb politician. He understood. But you know what? He still gets credit for it because he's trying to show his support for law enforcement. He's trying to send a message that this is a priority for me. And Joe Biden sent a very different message. In the meantime, every day what we get, Ben, is a message that Trump is the evil one. Trump said the not nice thing about the judge's daughter. Trump is somehow uniquely bad and Joe Biden is somehow uniquely good, or as Special Counsel Robert Hur put it, well-meaning, right? That's his critic. That's as much as his official critic will say. He's well-meaning, but elderly. And I just couldn't get over what a missed opportunity it was for the president and how, as a mother, I can't help but feel I'm going to hold it against him.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many times Biden can make this mistake. We saw this with East Palestine, Ohio as well, where Biden wouldn't go out there to the scene of the train spill, but Trump would. Trump went there and he was distributing resources and getting people Big Macs. Trump does have a very good political instinct for these sorts of situations. And as you say, politicians are politicians. He's not going to every funeral in the country. But he does understand that symbolism matters. And when you go and you show sympathy for a fallen police officer and you say that crime needs to be brought under control, and meanwhile, Joe Biden is partying it up with celebrities, that is not a good look. And it's very reminiscent of 2016 when Hillary Clinton was so assured of her own victory that she was doing her DNC videos with Elizabeth Banks singing Fight Song. And meanwhile, Donald Trump was running around talking to actual normal Americans, not at Radio City Music Hall. These are bad split screens for Joe Biden. By the way, I think it was a bad split screen for Joe Biden to just be on stage with the former two presidents who are Democrats because he is older than both of them. Bill Clinton left office when I was 17 years old, and Bill Clinton is still younger than Joe Biden is today. Barack Obama looks like he is still breathing and alive on that stage. Joe Biden looks like he's stumbling around, doesn't know what the hell he's doing. It was really bad look for him. And again, I don't know who Biden thinks he's appealing to. My guess is that the campaign knows this, which is why they didn't actually just release a lot of tape from this sort of star-studded celebrity event. But they need to get money from a bunch of New Yorkers, and so they have this Stephen Colbert on stage interviewing these three guys. That's not a good look for Biden. Biden is bleeding support, but he's not bleeding support, by the way. Everyone's talking about he's bleeding support from the progressive left. That's why he's going to lose. The reason if he loses, he is going to lose is because he is bleeding support from blue-collar white voters. That is actually where he outperformed in 2020 vis-a-vis Trump. Trump did better in cities in 2020 than he did in 2016. He didn't do quite as well among suburban voters and rural voters, actually, in some areas. Joe Biden did better than expected in those areas. But those are precisely the areas where Joe Biden is absolutely bleeding, which is why he's trailing anywhere from 3 to 6 points in Michigan. Well, if Joe Biden loses Michigan, this election is over. He is in serious trouble, and it's not going to help him hanging around with glitzy celebrities, having Lizzo sing for him, while Donald Trump is out there visiting with the families of slain cops.
Yeah, and here was Trump discussing what he saw as Biden's reluctance to go on Fox and Friends on Thursday.
I think that politically he can't support the police. I think he's also making a mistake. But I think politically his base won't let him support the police. And I support the police, I would say, at the highest level of any president by far, maybe double or triple. And they knew that. That's why when I walked into that funeral parlor, it was like love. They didn't even call the family. They could have called. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know even a call would be perhaps, I'm not sure they'd take his call, right? I'm really not sure they'd take his call.
That's right. All he had to do was call. I mean, they actually did let New York Governor Kathy Hochul go, New York City Mayor Eric Adams go. The family said it's fine. These are Democrats. They didn't try to make it political. The family didn't. If the sitting president, Joe Biden, never mind the other two who were with him, Obama and Clinton, said, we'd like to pay our respects to Officer Diller, you don't think the family would have said, yes, it would be an honor. They're not even blaming the mayor for the policies, although they are, but they allowed him to speak. They certainly wouldn't blame the president. So it was just, he didn't want to be there, Ben. He wanted to be with Jason Bateman. That's the bottom line. That's why I don't buy it. It's like, it's the same guy who checked his watch when the bodies came back to Dover after Afghanistan and who let the damn White House dogs bite 24 Secret Service agents with really serious wounds and didn't give a shit, enabled his drug-addled son to go do business for him so he could line his own pockets throughout his post-vice presidency and possibly during. Same guy who you don't get to hear those facts on NBC, the fact checker of us all.
Yeah, the big lie about Joe Biden is that he's a deeply empathetic person. I think that's actually fallen away pretty dramatically for the American public. If you look at his polling stats, when he first took office, he was in the mid-50s. He was a pretty popular guy when he first took office. And then it quickly became apparent that this is a person who really cares much more about himself than pretty much anyone else. And that became mostly apparent during the Afghanistan pullout, when he obviously cared nothing about the Afghan allies who were being left there to be murdered by the Taliban or American troops who'd been blown up. He still has members of his administration going around and talking about what a wonderful pullout it was and how basically no Americans died, despite the fact that 13 American service people were killed in the line of duty by terrorists because of the failure of that pullout. This is Joe Biden. I mean, this is the same guy who every single time he is talking with any family member of a person who died, he starts dragging out the story about Bo. And he'll do it with like service members. He'll be talking about a service member who was killed in the line of duty. He'll be talking with the family, and he'll talk about how his son was killed in the line of duty, which isn't even true. This kind of idea that Joe Biden is an empathetic elderly gentleman, I don't think a huge number of Americans buy that outside of Democratic bases. And that's a real problem for him, because if the race was supposed to be in 2020 between nice old man Joe Biden and crazy nutjob Donald Trump, who's mean and only cares about himself, well, that's not the race in 2024. In 2024, it's whatever you think of Trump versus Joe Biden, a not particularly empathetic, deeply angry, somewhat addled old man who has been really bad on policy. That is not a good race for Joe Biden. I've said for years that when it comes to presidential races, it really is about who the race is a referendum on. If the race is a referendum on you, you're going to lose. In 2016, it was actually Hillary, not Trump. In 2020, it was Trump, not Biden. In 2024, it seems pretty clear, actually, that this is going to be a referendum on Biden, not Trump.
I really think Trump just needs to stay out of the spotlight. You know, I'm not talking about Officer Diller's wake, but his numbers are starting to tighten a bit. We're going to get to that in our next segment. But don't you think, Ben, the smartest move for Trump is to just not say too much? You know, that the people who can't stand Trump are suburban women. They can't stand him. And being reminded of his bombast and his natural personality and his willingness to pick fights may fire up the base, but it totally alienates the group he really needs to get out and vote for him.
Well, actually, what he really needs to do is get a bunch of Democrats not to vote for either, right? And the only way to do that is to stay out of the limelight. The turnout in this election cycle is going to be way lower than it was in 2020 because everybody voted by mail 6 months in advance of the election in 2020. Usually in every presidential election, you add somewhere between 2 and 4 million new voters to the voter rolls in terms of how many people vote in a presidential. Between 2016 and 2020, that number jumped by over 20 million. That is not going to be duplicated this time. You're going to get way lower voter turnout, particularly in a lot of areas where Joe Biden needs the voter turnout. Joe Biden is counting on his voter turnout to be higher because Trump gets people to the polls on the Democratic side of the aisle. But here's the thing. Trump doesn't need to do anything to get people like me to vote for him. I'm going to vote for him. My family's going to vote for him. And I think everybody that I know is probably going to vote for Trump. But there's a group of people who will not vote for Joe Biden because they actually don't care all that much about Joe Biden. They don't like him very much, who might show up to vote if, again, this turns into a referendum on Trump. So ironically, what Trump needs to do is run Joe Biden's 2020 campaign. He needs to go to a basement and do nothing for like 7 months, and he'll be president again.
Yep. And even with the criminal trials, just he doesn't actually have to fan it. The media will do their part and the right-wing media will cover the other side. And Trump doesn't have to put himself in the middle of each and every one of those news stories. And yet that doesn't sound like President Trump. As we approach another critical election, many Americans are concerned. Recent studies reveal that an astonishing 56% of citizens report feelings of anxiety or dread about the upcoming election. But look, I want to tell you about AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. AMAC is more than a senior organization. During these challenging times, they fight for common sense. They're going to help eliminate that dread you're feeling. And they fight for the U.S. to return to traditional American values. Visit amac.us/Megyn today. to get an exclusive election year special, a 4-year AMAC membership for just $30. As an AMAC member, you not only enjoy money-saving benefits, but also the AMAC magazine, free Social Security and Medicare advice, a trusted voice in Washington, and a community of like-minded patriots. Take advantage of this election year special, 4 years for $30, and be part of the solution. Join now at amac.us/Megyn. That's amac.us/MEGYN. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.